All right, everybody. Another beautiful Tuesday morning here in studio with my good friends Matt and Bill. Today we're talking about one of my favorite subjects, negotiation. And I'm sure I'm going to learn a lot from you guys because I'm terrible at it. So I'm excited to learn from you guys on how I can negotiate better. Boys, how are we doing this morning?
Good morning, Evan. Good morning. Right now, you're just trying to negotiate sleep, aren't you?
Absolutely, yeah.
With a newborn
With
at
a
home.
newborn, I'm not negotiating very well.
She's winning. Avery's winning the negotiation every night with sleep. Well, hey, thanks, Evan. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Matt, welcome back.
Thank you.
my man.
Speaking of negotiating, I should negotiate some more PTO because that was didn't feel long enough. But you drive a hard bargain and made me come back.
Yes, at some point we got to work, right? And Matt was at the beach last week having fun. I'm sure he was still doing some work because just in his nature, and it's good to have him back. I have 2 more days in this thing, so thank you for bearing with me and my sling and throughout this ordeal and almost back to normal. Who knows, before long I might even be able to sleep in my bed. That would be fun, and get out of the recliner. So we're talking about, speaking of recliners, something I negotiated a couple months ago, which has been a great negotiation, been a great tool. But, everybody talks about negotiation and says life's a negotiation, right? Everything in life's a negotiation. I struggle with that because I don't think everything in life's a negotiation. I guess by definition, if you how you define negotiation, it could be. Mm-hmm. Right. And the way we like to think about negotiations is when we have needs and someone else has needs and we're looking for good outcomes to satisfy both those needs, mm-hmm. then, maybe everything's a negotiation, right? Like dinner could be a negotiation where you and your spouse both are hungry. You have taste buds that might be different. And depending on who has a stronger hankering for something special, you might win. But I think in that term, there's a lot of negotiations that take place in life.
Mm-hmm. I think it was actually something that you told me a long time ago. I have a very simple definition, and it's just finding mutually beneficial outcomes, and it's gives and gets. That's all negotiation really is when you break it down. And I'm sure you'll talk about it and don't want to steal the thunder, but with the gives and gets definition, if you're given everything,
getting bullied.
Yep, you're not in a negotiation. If you're getting everything, guess what? You're still not in a negotiation. You're probably a third price, or there's an ulterior motive there.
Yeah, or you're the bully.
Yeah.
Right. So today we're going to talk about some of the foundations. We think we would like to. Negotiation's an important enough topic that we're going to string this out a couple weeks and stay on topic with negotiation. Today we're going to talk about the foundations and the fundamentals of negotiation. What are the things? More psychology, the mindset that we need to take into the negotiation.
Yep.
So I think the first thing with that, right, and one of the most important things to remember with negotiation is it's not personal. I think we see people oftentimes get locked into negotiations about I have to win because they make it a personal battle with the other, and they become confused or derailed about their original intention, which was getting needs met. Mm-hmm. Right? So it's not personal. And one of the hardest things to do is separate your needs from the other party. And when we get locked in on the other party, what they're doing to us, with the positions they're taking, why, doesn't make sense. That's not the clear mind we need to go into a negotiation. When we're negotiating, we always want to stay objective. We always want to stay locked in on the needs we had, the outcomes we're seeking, the objectivity of the conversation, the objectivity of the approach versus the subjectivity of the person on the other line of that, or the other end of that discussion.
Yeah, and I think it becomes especially personal as well when we put our quota in front of the needs, or we don't have a full pipeline. Not that that's the scapegoat that we always go back to, but we see oftentimes a lot of stuff happen when we don't have enough prospects. We don't have enough people at the top of the funnel.
Right.
We put so much pressure on any given deal, any given interaction, and making it personal. For me, I think it's. I think oftentimes too when you're just introducing it at the end, and it becomes more of like an arm wrestling match, and I'm going to be able to beat them at the end. Where I think negotiation really starts at the beginning. It starts in discussions. It starts in your value proposition, and you're going to talk about that next. But questioning, even people that are doing PDRs, if we're talking about financial implication at the last meeting, or we're trying to sneak financial implication in, there's something wrong there.
Yeah, if we're 4 meetings in and we think we're delivering a proposal and we're just asking them, oh, by the way, what are you paying now?
Yeah.
Right? Or how's this impact your revenue, or how's this going to impact your ROI and your profitability? We've lost an incredible opportunity. And that's where, we start moving into that second foundational principle of questions, and how powerful questions are in a negotiation. And, we often think negotiations are about what we have to say and how we can tell them the thing they need to be reminded of. And we always come back to questions, right? We control encounters with the questions we ask and not the answers we give. And never is that truer than in negotiation. And, as Matt said, it should start early. So from the first conversation, we should be laying out, what's this whole thing going to look like? Because then once we lay that out early, we know the ground rules, right? We know what's acceptable. We know what to expect, versus functioning in that bubble of us just telling them, oh, this is going to be great for you. And, oh, we'd love to work with you guys. I'd love to work with you. We'd love to work with you. That's us language. Doesn't resonate with them. We always need to be using the language of them versus the language of us. And when I say things like, we'd love to work with you, now, what's that statement even mean? I mean, what is that, right? I mean, did you think I was showing up here today because I'd hate to work with you and I want to torture you for the next 3 years? Of course we'd love to work with somebody. And it's cotton candy language. Just like cotton candy dissolves when it hits the tongue. It's pretty, lovely colors and, great flavors, but as soon as it hits the tongue, it dissolves. Words like, we'd love to work with you, they dissolve as soon as they hit the ear. It's cotton candy language. So be more focused on the powerful questions that are defining an outcome, the questions that define what solutions look like, the questions that define what do we expect from here, right? And then the other thing with questions, I'm sorry, were you going to?
No, go ahead.
The other thing with questions is the most important questions we can ask in a negotiation are the ones that are confirming and clarifying. Because it's not good enough for us in a negotiation to have those happy years where someone says something like, oh yeah, we need to get this done by the end of the year. And we're like, okay, great. We'll run real fast to get this done for you by the end of the year, versus asking, what happens at the end of the year? Right? And make them start to define whether that end of the year is a want or a need. Because confirming and clarifying questions separate wants from needs. They kind of sift out, if you think about the sifter that a confectioner's sugar comes out of, right? When you're just sprinkling it on top. The sifter that separates wants from needs. And people will negotiate on needs. They'll anchor to those needs. Wants they use for their own advantage against us. So when we start negotiating into the people's wants, and we start focusing on trying to solve and deliver for their wants versus being focused on the needs, that's when things go sideways for us. That's where we lose leverage, we lose momentum, and we lose any type of authority we have in the process.
Yeah, I think stepping back too, talking about money and the financial impact is not bad.
No, it's necessary, and by the way, not just necessary for us.
Correct.
Necessary for them, right? It's our job to shed light on that and to bring light to it.
And there are a lot of salespeople that are uncomfortable talking about money. When we lay out financial impact is always that, ooh, when do I do it? How do I ask? Not sure. Can we talk about money? So just to lay the record straight there, talking about money is absolutely necessary. And I don't think it's ever too early to talk about money either. You might not walk in and say, what are you hoping to accomplish today? By the way, what's your budget?
Yeah.
Right? Not necessarily that, but I think we have to get money out there on the table.
And connect it to needs.
Correct.
Right? As we're having these conversations and needs arise, that's the time we start attaching money to it.
Yeah.
And as Matt said, like, think of it as an interview. If you went on an interview and they go, hey, welcome today, Bill, excited to have you here to talk about this role. Anything you have on your mind before we get started? And I say, yeah, what's the vacation policy and the pay, right? Are you going to hire that person? And as a salesperson, when you walk in, as Matt talked about, not having a full pipeline, when you don't have a full pipeline, a pipeline that's 2x, 3x, 4x, whatever it needs to be based on your sales cycle, your close percentage, whenever you have a pipeline that's too small, every deal is important, right? So you can't have healthy conversations. You can't have healthy negotiations because you're desperate. Desperate people do what, Matt?
Desperate things.
Desperate people do desperate things. And when we're desperate in a negotiation, that's when we start giving things away. That's when we almost start to beg because we don't have a financially independent mindset.
Well, we're not willing to walk, most likely, which is really important in a negotiation. So we talked about questions, and I'm a big fan of these proactive early questions. What are your financial expectations of this endeavor? How often do we ask that early on in the process? Because more oftentimes than not, for most salespeople, they might already be buying something or already using that service. And so usually they anchor to what they're paying now. Perception is reality. So let's get that out. I'm unafraid to ask, okay, what happens if someone comes in lower? What do you do for the people that come in higher, right?
And that's when somebody's saying they have to go out to bid. Remember, we don't always, sometimes we have to participate in bidding processes. We don't always have to participate. As my friend Matt likes to say, sales is not a participation sport. So going out and being told we're going to be part of an RFP process isn't necessarily a win. Being told we're part of an RFP process, we need to push back on a little bit and try to understand, well, what are you hoping to learn through the process?
Yeah.
Where did I fail to earn your trust? And if somebody goes, wow, my boss wants me to get 3 bids and okay, what are you going to do if a bid's 20% below ours? What are you going to do if somebody comes in 20% above us? Right? What are you going to do if we're the highest? And making people think through that's part of the negotiation. Because if someone tells you in that moment, well, I'm not going with low bid. We don't have to go with low bid. We just want to make sure we're in the same range. Make them think through the process. Say, well, what are you going to do if somebody's 20% lower?
Right. Another one of the questions I ask is, how open to creativity are you? And what I mean by that is on the scope. And I do that early on. Don't necessarily know what's going on in your facility or your organization or your current setup, but how open to you? Or do you know what you currently have is what you want? And why you're going to stick with it, is what you're paying the right price.
Yeah, and that question that Matt asked, like how open are you to creative input or suggestions or approaches? It's kind of that softening statement, right? That's the first blow against the wall as we want it to crumble of their assumptions. Because when they're like, what do you mean? Now we have them listening. Now we have an opportunity to start planting some seeds because we get to ask questions like, well, I'm just curious how locked you are on the current solution and knowing that that's the right one for you. Or how'd you come to the current solution? How'd you determine this is the right fit? How'd you determine this is the right scope? How did you and your current vendor, your current partner, how'd you guys get here? And now we're sharing, right? We're getting information that's going to be very valuable for us as we advance these discussions.
And it's amazing if we ask the question, do you think that's the right solution? Or do you think that's the right price? How often someone might say, nope, we're underpaying.
Yeah.
Or, nope, that's just what the predecessor put together. That's why we're talking.
Yeah.
So, don't be afraid if you do get a price, if you do get hours or some type of financial input, we got to stop and say, how do you feel about that? Is that the right amount? Is that the right price? And as you said, how did you derive to that? So one final thing, you mentioned the participation sport, which is, one of my favorite quotes. Sharpening the pencil is not a win. When someone says, hey, can you go sharpen the pencil? I see so many salespeople kind of get that sigh of relief of, all right, I'm going to give my best and final. If we lose it, it's because of the price. It's because of the organization. And so we're not there just to participate. So when you hear that sharpening the pencil, that's not a good thing. That's not happy. I'm still involved. We should view that as, okay, we need to negotiate what happens next.
So I'm driven nuts by cliches and non-precision language. And when somebody would say sharpen the pencil, right? What does that mean? And what does that even mean? So the only response that's right when somebody says, can you sharpen the pencil, would be, sharpen the pencil? And then just sit silently and wait for them to tell you what they mean.
Yeah.
Because why in God's name would I go, and this is something we're going to talk about next week, about negotiating against yourself. But
Yeah.
why would I go and negotiate against myself when they say sharpen the pencil and go back and say, I think they mean 12%.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go get, right?
Well, how many salespeople say, okay, they run away, and then they start sharpening the pencil?
Telling their manager, their boss, saying, hey, we got to give them more on price concessions.
Yeah.
And then they're hit with the question, hopefully they're hit with the question by a strong manager, a strong leader of why. And what happens when we do, right? Because are there 4 other people on the street sharpening pencils? I mean, I haven't sharpened a pencil since Sister Matilda's class, right? In like 4th grade. I used to love those pencil sharpeners. But what's that mean? Like, do we have everybody sharpening pencils, and then what?
Yeah.
Right? Versus saying, sharpen the pencil and make them define what they mean and say, and what happens if? Right? So, because if you say sharpen the pencil to somebody, they're going to say, well, you're just a little high. Then I might say, a little high? And they would say, yeah, we need like 10%. So, ooh, 10%.
Well, don't give away too much. We have another show to do.
Oh, God, this drives me nuts. Don't give it away. Don't give it away. Don't get bullied. Remember, if you're in the playground and somebody's taking your candy, you're getting bullied. If we're in negotiations and all we're doing is giving and not getting, we're getting bullied.
Yeah. Well, I think just to recap a little bit, I think it's never too early to be talking about FANT, and especially the financial impact. That doesn't need to come when we have a proposal created.
Yeah, and just for those who might be new to the show, FANT, financial impact, authority, need, timeline. I can't do my finger independently there. That's why it comes out 4. So financial impact, authority, need, and timeline, the 4 elements of any good deal and any deal. So if we're lacking one of those, we're not at the closing stages of an opportunity.
But I mean, to just in full transparency as well, I would say financial impact is sometimes the hardest of it. And if we have the luxury of a multi call or a multi-meeting sales cycle, we might need to dig into financial impact at the PDR. So, I do want to mention that, but
PDR,
it doesn't.
proposal draft review.
Yeah, I'm speaking in like a different language right now, but it doesn't prohibit us from starting to talk about financial impact early on, because we know what happens next. We know that they have something in mind, or maybe not. We know that we're going to propose, so let's talk about it.
And why do you think getting financial impact, financial implications, financial insights, why do you think that's the hardest part of the process?
I think it's twofold. I think not enough salespeople ask and are very afraid to talk about it. So when they do talk about it, it's a lot of non-precise language and sort of like, what price you want to pay?
Do you have a budget for this?
Yeah.
No? Okay, don't worry about it. We'll work around
Yeah,
it.
or, they're running out to the parking lot saying, how much do you want to pay for this?
Right.
And I think also, I think there's a little bit of bias that as buyers, that if we give them what we want to pay, or we give them a budget, that we're going to get a less competitive of a price. And so, whenever we coach and we ask for it, hey, what's your budget? What are your financial expectations? Whoa. Hey, seems like you're a little offended. Didn't want to offend you. By the way, giving that information is not going to get you any less competitive of price. I just want to simply understand where we are.
And how realistic.
Some goalposts, and, see the creativity or the scope.
I think we have very little difficulty getting budget and financial impact from our clients, and it's because we put people at ease. So if you're finding you're struggling at getting those numbers, if people aren't sharing them with you, it's because people won't give you information if they think you're going to use it against them.
Mm-hmm.
If they think you're going to use it to their detriment, people will hold back and not give you the information you need, and quite frankly, you deserve, if you're going to help them craft a competitive solution. So if you find that's happening often, look in the mirror. What are you doing to not put people at ease? Are you asking too early in the process? Are you asking at a time that doesn't demonstrate why it's valuable, right? I like to phrase it around, hey, as we're building our solution, where should we be looking? We could do anything you want. But as we build the scope of work, What numbers should we be working with
Yep.
to make it to make it valuable, make it competitive, make it easier for you? And when you share it in that context, people are more likely to give you a number. You still will get the occasional, well, I have no idea. This is new to us. We don't know what we should be paying.
What's your gut instinct tell you?
Yeah, I mean,
That's what I would go back
right,
with.
right. What's your gut tell you? Or, well, when you think about that, what's a good range? Because, I don't want to bring a $500,000 solution to a $200,000 problem.
Mm-hmm.
And people go, whoa, 500 G's.
Well, say that again, because I think that's really impactful whenever I mention that to a lot of salespeople.
Yeah, when people don't have a range, then they claim they have no idea what they should be spending. We like to give them ranges of, well, I don't want to bring a $500,000 solution to a $200,000 problem, or I don't want to bring a $50,000 solution to a $10,000 problem. And people will react and be like, no, I mean, this is important to us, and price it as you need to. And that tells me that 500 G's might be the right number.
Yeah.
Right? Or they react vehemently and they're like, what? Are you out of your mind? There's no way we could get $50,000 to do this. It's okay, but the 10 feels more in the neighborhood. Yeah, we could work with 10. Well, guess what? They had a number in mind. They just weren't ready to share it.
Yeah. What about those people that say, oh, I don't know, I have to look at the contract, or, Susie has the contract. I'm not sure what we're paying. I might need to find that.
Yeah. When you think you could share the information with me?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because if I just blow it off and go, oh, no problem, then I'm telling them my question wasn't legitimate, right? But if I say to them, when do you think you'll be able to find that information for us? Mm-hmm. It lets them know there was a real reason I asked you that. And they say, well, I don't know, I could call her today, but is it really that important? Say, well, it's going to be important for us as we start to understand the scope, right? Because as we're building our solution, if you're currently paying $10,000 and we know it's 20, we're going to have bigger issues than just the money. We're going to probably have to talk about the scope of work, probably talk about the level of service you're receiving, talk about whatever, right? So there's real value in that intelligence that we're trying to seek out. All right, hey, as we start to wrap up, a couple things. Let's remember we're going to be doing this for a couple weeks, which means how can we make this time more valuable for you and for us? That means submitting questions for us, submitting real life examples for us to walk through that you might be dealing with and we can address. We always want to submit those to Evan at TellericoGroup.com. That's Evan, EVAN, at TellericoGroup.com. Please share any questions you have about general selling, talent acquisition and hiring, or leadership inside your organization. Over the next few weeks, we'll be paying special attention to negotiation questions, negotiation challenges you might be having. But please submit those questions to us in situations so that we can make our time more valuable for you. A couple things to remember as we leave here today. It's not personal, right? It's not personal. One of the ways to remember to not be personal is think of White House press secretaries. No matter which side of the aisle you're on, no matter who you like, the really good press secretaries stay on message. They don't get pulled into those mean-spirited personal attacks. They don't get pulled into the ugliness of the fight, right? Of just who's going to be right and who's going to be wrong. They stay on message. That's what we need to do. We need to stay objective, stay on message. We need to remember the questions are our friends. We control encounters with the questions we ask, not the answers we give. So what are our great go-to questions? We need to be prepped and ready. This just doesn't happen, right? You don't roll out of bed one day and say, oh, well, time to negotiate. Now I'm a negotiator. No. Prepare your questions. Know what you want to ask. Know your responses. Know how to serve the other to help them share the information with you that allows you to serve them better. Yes?
Sounds good to me.
All right. Well, thank you. Appreciate you being with us. And it's so good to get back. We feel like we're getting back into our rhythm. I'm finally not in hospitals and Matt's not on vacation. Although we'll see what next week brings. And Evan's back at the desk after spending some time at home with his family. So all's good in the world. Thank you all. We'll see you next week. God bless you guys.